Jack Lueders-Booth is a photographer whose life and work have been defined by a sustained commitment to people, place, and the things that connect them. Jack made a decisive turn at the age of 35, leaving a successful career in the insurance industry to pursue photography. That decision led him to Harvard University, where he would spend decades teaching, mentoring, and shaping generations of photographers. He built an extraordinary body of documentary work, photographing communities often overlooked, from prison inmates to working-class neighborhoods to junkyards in Tijuana and the streets of Boston. Whether inside a prison or on a city block, Jack Lueders-Booth approaches his subjects with empathy, patience, and a profound respect, reminding us that photography, at its best, is an act of attention.
I came into photography by accident, really. I never intended to be a photographer. I was influenced by my father, who was a hobbyist, and I became a hobbyist and became more and more serious about it. Meanwhile, I was earning my living working for a Combined Insurance Company of America as assistant claim manager, really, in lucrative but unpleasant business, really. I didn't enjoy it very much. I had 3 kids, and I felt locked into this insurance career, really, and didn't know my way out, and became increasingly uncomfortable as I grew older. And when I was in my early 30s, I was still making photographs as an amateur, more and more seriously, actually. I carried a Leica in my briefcase to work to the insurance company, and I worked in Kenmore Square. And at noon, I would take the Leica and just go out and just photograph things around Kenmore Square. People, places, details of fences, of buildings, of traffic, of just whatever caught my attention. And it was great fun. I can't say I resented that what I was locked into. I'd come to accept it. Many other people had and were living happy lives. And I was prepared to do that for the rest of my life. Meanwhile, on the side, I was reading things like the Village Voice and Allen Ginsberg, and very much taken up with the Beat generation, and envy them their lifestyle and that they could actually be doing that instead of what I was doing. But I sort of reconciled myself to that. But then as time went on, opportunities opened up. A fellow named Dick Rogers and Todd Stewart, who were at that time teaching at Harvard, had a study group of interested amateur photographers, and we would meet. We would meet monthly and look at work. So it was very stimulating. I hadn't thought of my work at a really critical level up until that point, and my critical vocabulary was like non-existent. It was maybe a series of mental thoughts, or verbalized as grunts, like and then and that developed into like yes, maybe, no. That was and that was really that was adequate, really. And
Sure.
and I think that probably became unnecessarily complicated as I got into teaching. So to finish the story, through Dick Rogers and Todd Stewart, I ended up at Harvard part-time working in their design school lab, just as the lab manager. They knew that I understood photographic chemistry, that I could make a good print. I knew something about the medium. So I was invited to supervise this lab for the grad school, and I loved that. And through that, I became more stimulated and in touch with more and more people who were becoming interested in photography. And this would be like late 60s, and
Yeah.
the Carpenter Center was founded, I think, was built in like 1964, and their photography department began around the same time, but it wasn't called the photography department. It was called part of visual and environmental studies, and one would get a degree in that, even though they might have specialized in photography, filmmaking, painting, sculpture. The degree was visual studies, and all the departments were new, and probably the bureaucratically most challenging one was photography because of all the equipment, the cameras, and the films. It wasn't just it was running out of control. So Dick and Todd Stewart said, "Well, we know this guy across the river who worked. He's an administrator for an insurance company, so he must know something about administration. He's not a he's not a bad photographer. He understands photography. Why don't we see if he'll come over here for something like half or 2/3 his salary? And they invited me, and I thought about it and discussed it with my family, and they were very supportive, and I did. And even at that point, I never had aspiration of being a serious photographer. I was delighted. I was pleased just to be in that world, to become a small part of that world,
Sure.
running the darkroom, teaching printing, handing out film. It was just like, it was just, it was a renaissance. It was a rebirth for me, really, like at age 35, I think it was, 35. And so it was a whole new world, and it was much preferable to my earlier world. It seemed like more moral, or at least less amoral. And the only thing was the money, and it was worth sacrificing whatever it took to live on less, to be in that community of people who were thinking that way. And but even at that point, I never imagined that I would be in a position to make a contribution. I was just happy to be around it. And so, of course, I was still taking photographs. I guess I got better, and my pictures started making sense. And well, I should say that my initial draw to the medium was not the idea of making a substantial statement through art or through photography. It was the equipment, fascination with the equipment.
Really?
The key,
Okay.
yeah, really, yeah, absolutely. The equipment, like I had a Miranda, which was a single lens reflex. I lusted for a Nikon F, and would think about it, and eventually I got a Nikon F. And then I got into the darkroom, and I was self-taught in the darkroom. And I did a lot of monkeying around before I could get a print to come up in the developer, like dealing with exposure time. And then when the first image came up, it was magical. But under like
Yeah.
yellow light, like it's intimate, it's mysterious, and you put a piece of plain white paper into the developer, and out comes an
And there's a
image,
picture.
and I was hooked for life on that
Yeah.
alone. On that alone.
Well, and then you went on to get your master's without
I
having had
did.
an undergraduate degree, right?
Yes, that was a secret, but how did you know that? And yes, that's true.
I think I read it somewhere, but I only paid attention because I also don't, I didn't get an
I'm joking
undergraduate
about it
degree.
being secret. Right? I'm joking about that.
Well, it's interesting to me that you left college and started a career, and then mid-career made this shift that has taken you for a lifetime down a path that has created just some amazing bodies of work. It is not a path that you hear about very often. I'm not familiar with it. It's a unique.
Thank you. Yeah,
It's
I feel very fortunate. It is unusual. Yeah, it is.
one of the things that it feels like to me, and I'm only asking this because I want to try to understand it, is that it feels to me like a lot of people who teach at the college level tend to work on specific projects. Is that because of the schedule that you keep, that you now get to the summertime, you have time to be able to work on it, and you have some set period where you can work? Or am I misreading that?
Well, no, you're not misreading it. But other than the projects, I'm photographing all the time.
Yeah.
To this day, I'm more likely to leave my house. As I said to someone in another interview, I'm more likely to leave my house without my wallet than my camera. And I feel like not unclothed or naked, but I feel like something is absent. I photograph. I was in physical therapy yesterday, and with physical therapy assistant saw my camera and had seen it before and said, "What do you photograph?" And I said, "Well, I just took a photograph of a trailer truck out an my Uber window on the way over here." I photograph impulsively. I photograph a lot, and you're familiar with only the projects because the other stuff hasn't been formalized in such a way. Probably my
Right.
largest archive are family photographs over the past half century, and very few of them have reached the public eye because they're just a sort of disorganized thing. It's on a list that will be impossible to complete in my lifetime, and maybe I'll get to those. The current projects that are in circulation are taking up a lot of time.
Yeah, yeah.
it's all welcome, of course, but it prevents me from getting to other things.
Right, right. Well,
But
that's thank you for that clarification, because I think I
yeah.
assumed incorrectly
Now,
what I was
I
seeing.
want to I want to quote Gilles Perez here on that. He talks about when photographing, you get in you get in this zone, which you were asking somebody about recently. There's this zone where you become like, one with the subject, and you're making
Yes.
photographs, and the click of the subject, the click of the reshutter it's like an affirmation, and it's complete unto itself. And Perez says that even if you didn't have a photograph in the end, it wouldn't matter, because the experience is so transformative and exhilarating. And he said, and when you look at the print, it's a reminder of the experience, but it is only a pebble on the beach that you walk. And the only place that's recorded with any kind of certainty or clarity is in your mind, not in the photographic print. And I think he's right about that. My photography is similar to that of a compulsive underliner. Like if you read, if if uh, if you understand what I mean, it's like
I do. I
it
do.
means it's like if you look at something twice, then I take a picture if I have a camera with me, and I usually do.
Yeah.
And when I read something that's impressive or profound, and I don't want to forget it, I'll go back and I'll underline that sentence.
Let's chat about your images and the 3 images you have sent. Then they come from 3 of your major projects that you were referencing before. Where would you like to start? We're going to talk about 3 different projects: your women prisoners, Inherit the Land, and American motorcycle culture. Which image would you like to start with?
I would like to start with any, but the one that's on top here is this one.
Women prisoners? Tell us about this image and why this is important, and tell us about the project as well.
The project came about in a very indirect way. I went to Harvard in 1970, I guess. Left and was looking for something to photograph. I was photographing the ruins of a World War I anti-submarine fort on Long Island, Boston Harbor. And so there was the ruins of a anti-submarine fort. There, dormitories, sleeping quarters,
Mm-hmm.
gun turrets. It was all returning to earth, crumbling concrete. It was just, very interesting. And I was photographing with a 5x7 view camera. And while I was doing that, this fellow would come out and have his peanut butter sandwich lunch with me while I was photographing. In many ways, it was a homeless shelter. It was much more custodial than therapeutic. And he asked me to come in, if I would come in and photograph some of the recreational improvements he was making to increase the morale of the inpatients. And I did. And in the course of that, I began photographing some of the patients. And the patients were very interested in my photographs, and some of them were interested in the process. And they were mostly sitting around, not doing a whole lot. And I thought, man, wouldn't it be wonderful to teach these people photography? A simple darkroom, and what a thrill that would be. If it was a fraction of the thrill it was for me, it would be a great thrill for them. And I thought about that. It didn't happen there. But then later, when I was at Harvard and feeling insecure about my teaching, reasonably well, but having nothing to prove that I could do what I was doing. I had no degree in that. And
Yeah.
so I went to the Graduate School of Education and told them what I was doing, and that I wanted a graduate degree, and I had a specific idea about what I wanted to do. And what I wanted my thesis to be installing photography curricula in institutions of confinement. And they accepted me and my thesis proposal. And at the same time, MCI Framingham was looking for a photography teacher or someone to develop a photography program. And
Hmm.
that's how I came to be there. And when I did go there in 1978, my own photography was more along the lines of the current color pictorialism of Stephen Shore, Mitch Epstein, Len Gentry. I was convinced that that was the future of photography, and I wanted that to be part of my future, and that I thought that documentary photography was falling away, and it was being better done by current TV coverage and documentary film. So I thought I was pretty much done with my interest in that. So I went into the prison, and with my daughter Laura, 18-year-old daughter, she was my teaching assistant or teaching partner really for the first year. She was a big help in my acceptance by the prisoners, because here I am, this middle-aged white guy from who knows where, doing what, who knows.
Mm-hmm.
But he has a daughter who's about our age. They seem to work well together, and we accept him for now because largely of that, I say. And that's how it began. We took an abandoned wing of the hospital, Laura and I and a couple of other people, and converted cells into enlarging stations. We put sinks in main areas. This took us several months, and when we were done, we opened up the program, and we taught it together for the first year. To get the degree, I had to do it. I had to write about it and write a thesis about why it was good and what was beneficial, what wasn't, and it was accepted.
And so, but that was the teaching part. The photographs came when? While you were doing
Out
the
of that,
teaching, or that?
they came out of that. As I said, I didn't think I was interested in that sort of photography. I was happy to teach
Yeah.
them, but I had no interest in that prison or anything of the sort as a documentary project. But through making photographs of them at their request, my interest became rejuvenated in documentary photography through photographing them. So much so that when I had completed the work for the degree in 2 years, I managed to stay on for another 5, just for the purpose of photographing them. It was a pretty marvelous experience. That there they were, and they were willing to be photographed, eager to be photographed, and it seemed to me like an opportunity, a privilege and an opportunity. Yes, but it also seemed that I was uniquely poised to make photographs that hadn't been made before in prisons, that I had this sort of access and was trusted by the inmates and the administration, so that I could photograph as I pleased. And this woman whose name I do not have at the tip of my tongue, but she was my teaching assistant, and she was an inmate. And this is her father. And her father worked a regular job, and he would come by every night on his way home from work and stop in and visit his daughter. I was just very moved by that, his commitment and dedication. Their closeness as evident in this photograph. I had a sense about him that he seemed like, prison savvy. And so at one point, hoping not to invade his privacy, I said, "Sir, may I ask, did you ever do time?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I did, 10 years of hard time somewhere." So he had also been, incarcerated in his own life.
Well, there's a particular affectionate relationship that they have. The posing does not feel unnatural at all. There seems like there's something very sweet about it.
Yeah, I think so too. It's just, yeah, we could go on. I have this superstition that I'll share with you, and that is, I think that the more you talk about a photograph, the less it becomes. So I think we've probably said enough about this.
Okay. Well, you're the expert.
I wouldn't say that, no.
Of the two of us, I promise you that's the case. Well, so then let's move on to the second of your projects. Would you like to talk about Inherit the Land or American Motorcycle Culture?
Let's talk about Inherit the Land.
Let's do that. Okay. So this is down in Tijuana, Mexico, right?
Tijuana, and I should say that all of my projects I came to sort of by accident. I didn't say I want to go photograph this or that or the other. Just they fall in my lap the way the women prisoner did, for example. When Luis Alberto Oria, who's an acclaimed writer, he won the National Book Award. He was a good writer, and he was invited by Harvard to come and be a guest critic teacher for artist in residence for a year. And we met. I also have a son who lives in San Diego, California. So after Luis had finished his year at Harvard and was in California, I was visiting my son in San Diego, and I called up Luis and said, "Let's get together." And we got together. And he said, "Jack, I would like you to come down to Tijuana and see some of the people who are living in and off of the dumps and landfill there that I am writing essays about in the San Diego Reader." And so I went down. It was amazing. I mean, when I saw these people who were like living in trash and living off of trash and living in shanties and the most deplorable marginal conditions I've ever seen, probably close to that exist really. And so I started making photographs because he asked me to, and I made 4 or 5 rolls, and we went back home. I sent him contact sheets. I thought he'd just be interested in seeing them, and he liked them a lot. And He used many of them. He used one per chapter for the book that he published out of those San Diego Reader articles called Across the Wire. And he used those photographs. And I had become, so smitten with the whole thing that I myself on my own decided to return and make this more of a project. Because I had access through him and through his friend, Pastor Vaughn, who was a missionary to the area. So through those two guys, I had credibility and access, and I went there for probably 8 of the next 10 years for about 2 months a year and amassed the body of work that became Inherit the Land. And this particular photograph, what can we say about this? This is a father and his new infant. Everything in the photograph came from the dump. The chest of drawers, the bed, the shelving. They were very resourceful and recycling things from the trash, repairing them, making them usable, and pointing their households. They also, through accumulating forklifts that had been damaged, other pieces of wood, building shanties. This is collaborative, obviously. He agreed to be photographed with his kid, and I'm photographing him. Also on the wall, you can't see it in the small print, but it's a picture of Michelangelo's David. But
Yes.
but the father, so as not to scandalize his kids, had painted a pair of swimming trunks on on David. So I got this picture. I felt good about it. Henry was talking about when he was talking about the picture of him, the jockey explaining the loss of the horse to the owners. He was talking
Yes.
about he had this feeling that he had this picture, and it was very protective of the. Well, I had the same feeling about this picture as I was walking out of the shanty, and then I realized I had no film in the camera when I made
Oh, no.
the picture. I had no film in the camera, and I couldn't believe it. I said,
Oh, no.
do I dare go back and ask him to do this again? And can I do it again? I mean, can I get that moment again? So I put another roll of film. I didn't speak Spanish. He didn't speak. He didn't speak English. So I put on the camera. I opened the back and pointed to the empty, and held the film up.
Oops.
And he got it. And so I just can we do it again? And we did it again, and it seemed as good as the other one felt. Let me say that.
Well, that's a good transition to your third project. So I'm just going to say the 3 images that you have chosen, the father and the daughter, the father with his child in Tijuana, and then this image as well, all of them have this tender touch.
Oh, good time. Go ahead.
That's all I have to say. I mean, you've chosen a consistent, something that has a really sweet, sort of tender element in all of the images you have.
Right. Thank you.
So tell us about this project, but also this image as well.
I've been involved with motorcycles since I became aware of them as a toddler almost, and from there to the wish to own one, and then finally at age 18 owning one, building them, owning them, buying them, selling them, not as a dealer, but just getting rid of old ones and getting more interesting ones, racing them, commuting on them. They were, a very important part of my life. It was an avocation, but it was a very demanding avocation that often took, time away from other things. This photograph was made at Daytona Beach during what's called Speed Week. The Speed Week is when the Daytona 200 attracts the best riders in the world. And, simultaneously, this is going on during Speed Week in Daytona City, the city. The people in these photographs have no interest at all in the races, but it just happens to correspond. So I photographed at will. I had press passes that were inauthentic, really.
Just made of yourself?
For cutting and pasting. This was before the internet, and I couldn't do it today because anybody who questioned it could go online right away and find out, is this guy an authorized photographer for the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or whatever it was. That allowed for a lot of latitude and false IDs. And
so this was in Daytona. Excuse me for not being as familiar with this project as I should be. But so did you go to Sturgis and Laconia, or
I didn't? No, I didn't. I photographed mostly around the New England area where there was plenty of activity. But Daytona
Sure.
was special. Sturgis is special, but that would be too far to go. And my primary interest in motorcycling at that time, and still is, although I don't, was racing. And I
Yeah.
was really there for the Daytona 200, and also at the same time, photographed the Harley Davidson culture. It's rather in depth. The Harley Davidson part of this project. It includes like the Boot Hill Saloon, which is an infamous Harley Davidson hangout. This picture, I single this out. This is a collaboration, clearly, but it's not the same kind of collaboration as this or the other, where the people agreed to be photographed. I just
Yeah.
saw this couple and this motorcycle, and there was something about them that seemed like, very interesting, magical almost in their perfection. I'm using a large camera, 6x9 camera, so it was hard to.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't photograph surreptitiously or inconspicuously. It was unless I was gonna be moving and moving quickly. But
I
so
was
I raised.
assuming that this was 35 millimeter by the shot, but I wouldn't have guessed that it's 6x9.
It is six by
But
nine.
yeah.
It takes a little more time. I saw these people. I raised my camera. I photographed, as I always do. I photographed sort of around them to get their read on how they felt about me, and
Yeah.
were they receptive? Did they turn their back? Did they hit me? And they seemed increasingly receptive. We never did exchange words. I just raised the camera and, waited for this moment. They came to the camera, so openly and willingly, which is a gift, really. And I actually wrote about this for The Guardian, if I may. It's just a couple of sentences here. I'll read it to you.
Sure.
We cannot know how this young man, as much a stranger to me as to you, wished to look or be perceived by those who might view this photograph. But he comes to the camera with trust and candor that persuaded me of the truth of what I infer. He is not revealing an aspirational identity. He is revealing himself, and I am honored.
I like it.
Then I wanted to say that that this is actually a paraphrase of what Robert Adams said in Why People Photograph. Analog photographers are made to wait to get into the darkroom before viewing their work, where sometimes epiphanies will occur. When they turn on the light over the fixture. And that's how I felt about this, because it was a film camera, not a digital camera. I didn't know what I had until I saw it, and it's like, and you do feel like it's an undeserved gift, because, wow, and I think the photographers can say that about their work, because so much other than them is involved in the work. It's a machine, it's a camera. I mean, you hold it up, it's not painted stroke by stroke. It's a combination of a number of factors, like being in the right place at the right time, being on top of your craft to the point of being able to do this sort of thing.
I want to talk for just a second about a project that you have not shown that I'm a big fan of, the Orange Line project, in part because I used to live in the South End. And I remember it when the elevated Orange Line was, down Washington Street and into Roxbury over there. But I'm saying these things because it allows me to show some pictures of that project as I'm rambling on about it. But that for me, as a person who is from this place, is a special one for me that I particularly enjoyed seeing when the book came out. Can you just, even though it's not one of your three, talk briefly about that project?
Not one of my three, not one of the three I chose. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that it was any less a favorite than these. I think that these maybe because they were less seen, or maybe these because there was more to say about them. Perhaps, I'm not sure, but I really don't favor one project over the other, and I hold that project in very high esteem, and I enjoyed it tremendously, and I like it.
It's a fantastic book, and I mean, I have a history working in transportation. When the elevated Central Artery was down in Boston, I was down shooting, not as well as Michael Hintlian did, but that was an early project that I did, and I was a traffic reporter for this in Boston for a long period of time. So the whole transportation world and the MBTA and the road system is always special to me. So when that book came to my attention, it was a celebration for me. And it was also a celebration that it was so darn good.
I bought a Deerdorf, my own 8x10 camera. I use that on the Orange Line for its quality, yes, but not so much for its quality as wanting to not appear to be sneaking about with a small camera taking candid pictures. I wanted to declare my presence. Also, it had benefits in the the large camera called attention to itself, and people would ask questions sometimes, and those who would ask questions would consent to being photographed. So it worked in many ways.
Well, Jack Lueders-Booth, you know my last question. We talked about it beforehand. I asked folks like you who have been generous enough to come on the program here to tell me if there is a photograph or photographs that you would like to see me talk about with the photographer on this program.
Well, as said at the top, maybe it wasn't recorded. There are two, actually. There are two,
Yeah.
and they are Bill Burke and Carl Baden. Should I tell you the images as it describes?
Please do. Yes. Yeah.
Well, there are many for both of them. They're marvelous photographers with rich portfolios. If I were to, off the top of my head, I would probably reconsider if I looked at all their work again. But off the top of my head, I would say Carl Baden's Blonde and Bill Burke's picture in Cambodia of a person holding a rocket launcher, holding a rocket launcher. I wouldn't limit them to, and you won't, but they made many photographs. Those are ones that come to my head immediately without looking at everything.
Jack, thank you so much for the suggestions. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Take care.
It's been a great conversation, and I want to thank you all for watching The Crit House.